Hey guys, I'm Noah and this is Analog Resurgence, and today we're going to be talking about Super 8 cameras. Alright, let's get into it. In a previous video, I already covered the Kodak Super 8 film format and went over the available stocks that Kodak currently makes today. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you have not done so already, because today I want to jump right into what you need to know in order to buy your own Super 8 camera and get out there and start shooting. So just like a lot of old vintage gear, you're always kind of left wondering what's available and what's good out there that's actually gonna get you good results when you wanna shoot. And finding a Super 8 camera that will actually give you good results can be a little bit tricky, but you can easily figure out which ones are gonna give you great shots just based on a number of things to look for when you come across them. All right, let's break down the three main things to look for when you find a camera: motor function, exposure system, and various camera features. Motor function. First thing, does your camera work? Now this is a basic one, but of course you want to be able to check this out. Most Super 8 cameras just take regular AA batteries, and the battery compartment is located just in the handle of the camera. Many cameras have this trigger that starts the camera up. You should know if your motor works pretty quickly. Just put some batteries in, press the trigger down, and you should hear a sound just like this. That's a good sign. Along with this sound, there are two moving components inside the film compartment of the camera. The spinning mechanism here inside the camera works to spool the film up inside the plastic Super 8 cartridge as you're shooting it through the camera. And somewhat harder to see is this fast moving piece here by what's called the film gate. This moves rapidly up and down that helps to advance the film as it's being exposed frame by frame. Now you should actually be able to see the shutter opening. Press down the trigger of the lens and look through the film gate and you should see some light coming through. It's also a really good idea to take a small toothbrush and just clean out the gate of your Super 8 camera before you use it. You do this because a lot of these old cameras can have dirt or grime on the edges of their frame. So that kind of covers the basic motor function. You know everything's moving in your camera, you know that your aperture is opening up and light's coming through. Now let's take a look at one of the most important parts of your Super 8 camera: the exposure system. It's the part that decides whether you can be confident or not about shooting various types of film inside your camera and having it expose the film properly. A lot of older cameras were only ever designed to properly expose automatically for the lower ISOs of films from the 1970s. But now Kodak makes high ISO films such as 500T and a variety of them, which means that you want to be confident in knowing that if you put one of those cartridges in, no matter what it is, your camera will give you great looking results. Certain cameras actually have a manual option, which is typically a dial on the side like this. When you move this dial, an indicator inside the viewfinder moves along a series of f-stop aperture values at the bottom of the viewfinder. Now, this is great when you actually know exposure and you have a handheld light meter, but there are automatic cameras that can do this entirely for you, which makes it easier for those of you who maybe don't know exposure super well. So you have to find yourself a camera that has an automatic exposure system that you can trust for any type of film that you put into it, which can be a bit of a big request for some of these cheaper cameras out there. Super 8 film ISO is detected based entirely on this notching system on the cartridge. The notch is a different size depending on the ISO of the film. These notches line up with a series of pins right inside the camera beside the film gate. One of the most important things to look for when you find a Super 8 camera anywhere is the number of pins inside the film compartment. Some cameras have a series of steps and others have kind of a slider. The more pins that can be pressed down when your cartridge is inserted into the camera means the higher number of ISOs that the camera is able to automatically detect for you. For example, this camera says inside the film compartment here that it will only expose for these older ISO films, and it only has one pin to automatically detect the ISO on the cartridge. But it has a manual option on the side to be able to specify exposure for yourself. Any Super 8 camera that you come across with only one pin inside the film compartment is usually safe to use with Kodak's Vision 3 50D ISO film because it has a very low ISO, which is similar to the ISOs of the older films that these cameras were designed for. This silver camera though has more pins inside of it than the black one does, which means that it's fine to automatically expose for a wider variety of film ISOs. On the opposite side, it does still have a manual option, as well as a battery check button and a button that will adjust the exposure for backlit situation. Many old Super 8 cameras also require a secondary light meter battery, which is typically an old 1.3 volt mercury battery. They don't make these batteries anymore, but you can get alternatives such as wine cells. If you guys are still in doubt about what kind of film your camera can expose, you can print yourself off one of these and put it inside your camera. It's a cartridge notch ruler, which will help you figure out what kind of ISOs your camera can detect. I will put a link to that in the description. Okay, so now you've got yourself a camera with a functioning motor, a great exposure system that's going to give you amazing shots. So let's round it out by looking at the other various knobs and dials on your camera. Camera features. So probably the most standard option inside any Super 8 camera you come across is an internal orange filter. This filter will help to convert color tungsten balanced film to be shot outdoor under daylight settings. And this filter is activated by either your cartridge itself or a switch on the outside of the camera. Daylight cartridges will not have a slot on the bottom here because it doesn't need this filter. But tungsten films will have this slot because they need this filter. What if you're shooting tungsten film under tungsten light? Well, you can either activate the switch on the outside of the camera or put in what was called a filter key that certain cameras have to remove this filter. Cameras like these simply need a screw to remove the filter, and ones like these would have had a filter key with them, but luckily can be activated with a quarter or something similar. Some cameras will also have switches that control the frame rate of the camera. Many cameras by default will shoot at 18 frames per second. But if your camera does have a switch, you might see other options like 12, 24, 32. Some cameras are even capable of doing slow motion high frame rate options. But of course, you burn through film really quickly when shooting at these high speeds. Many cameras will also have cable socket releases, which allow you to do single frame exposures for stop motion animation, and continuous run and lock buttons for the motor controls so that you don't accidentally shoot when you don't want to, or you can shoot continuously without having to stand by the camera and press the trigger down. And last but not least, the film counter. The film counter helps you to keep track of how much you've shot and how much film you have left on your roll. A lot of cameras also have a signal inside your viewfinder to let you know once you've finished up your roll. There's a wide variety of the types of Super 8 cameras that you can get. Many of them involve loading the cartridge from the side, but a number of them also involve loading the cartridge from behind, like this one. Once you have your camera, you're ready to shoot, and all you need is your cartridge of film. So just load up your cartridge and you're ready to go. You can always check to make sure that your camera's motor is functioning by taking a marker and dotting the front of your Super 8 cartridge. Then you put it into the camera, run the motor for just a second or two, and take it back out. If the marker is gone, it means your film is running through the camera properly. And that's what you should be looking for when you're trying to find your very own Super 8 camera to get into shooting. Now, there are all sorts of film resources online for trying to find cameras and camera information, but the one I would definitely recommend is a little site called FilmCorn. FilmCorn has all sorts of information on cameras, manufacturers, the different features of cameras, and will help you to track down the sort of camera that will get you shooting with all the features that you want. I will of course put a link for FilmCorn in the description, and I would really recommend that you check that out. The biggest problem that I always encountered when talking to people is just not knowing what their camera is capable of doing. But if you keep all of these things in mind, then you'll be able to find yourself a camera that will give you great looking shots. Thank you guys so much for watching, and subscribe if you learned anything at all from this. And check back every week because I'm going to continue to cover all sorts of analog formats, continuing on into 16mm soon and getting into some still formats as well. So thank you guys so much again, and I'll see you guys soon.